Let us begin. Today's Daf Yomi is Nedarim. Daf Samach Gimel Nedarim 63. We're going to start on the bottom of Samach Beis and the base, 3 lines from the bottom, where the Gemara is discussing the debate, a dispute between Tana Kama and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, that if a person has said that they're going to take a vow that they're not going to drink wine until Ad HaGeshamim, until the rains come, then the implication is Ad Shetere Revia Shania. The Tana Kama says until the actual Revia Shania comes down. What's the Revia Shania? Revia means the rain. The Gemara in Tainus tells us, comes from the fact that the drops are mating with the ground, and so that's called the Revia. And there's 3 Revias. There's the first Revia, the second Revia, and the third Revia. We're going to see on Samach Gimel Alpha debate as to when these 3 Revias, the dates of these 3 Revias. But according to the Tana Kama, if the person says he's not going to drink wine until the rains, it means until the actual second rainfall comes down. Whereas Rosh Shpag said, until the time of the rainfall, meaning it doesn't have to be the second rainfall, but it means until the time of the second rainfall, not the actual rain, but the time where it would be expected that it would come. So it says the Gemara on Samach Beis and Beis 2 lines on the bottom. When is there a dispute between the Tana Kama saying it actually needs to rain? Rosh Bag says it's just the time of the rain. That's if he uses the formulation of Ad HaGeshamim. That's where there's a dispute until the rains, because he says extra. So since he doesn't just say Ad HaGeshamim, and since he says Ad HaGeshamim, that's why the Rabbanan are of the position it needs to be actually until the actual rain comes down. Amar Ad HaGeshamim, and if he just says until the rain without adding on Ad HaGeshamim, that means Agizman Geshamim. Then even the Chachamim would admit that this is only until the time of the rain, but not the actual rain. No, then even the Chachamim would mean it means until the time of the actual rain, and not just the time of the rain. So that's how Rabbi Zera argues. So the Gemara challenges this. Mesave, Gemara challenges on top of 63a. We have a contradictory source. It says in the Tosefta from Tainus, and the Gemara in Mesachas Tainus goes into this debate in much more granular detail. What is the essence of the 3 Revias? So there in the Vavam Adalf, the Bryce states, Ezuz Mana Shal Revia. What's the time of the rains? Habachira, the first rain, according to the first position there in this Bryce, says Begimel is on the 3rd day of Cheshvan. Beinun is the middle rain is Beshiva, is the second rain is on the 7th day, and the Afela and the last rain is on the Ezra Mishlosha, is on the 23rd day of Cheshvan. That's the position of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says Beshiva, so Ezra Mishlosha. Rabbi Yehuda says on the 7th day, the 17th day, and the 23rd day. The 17th day of Cheshvan would be the middle rain according to this approach. According to the Psukim, it seems like the 17th day of Cheshvan is also the time of the start of the flood. And then we go to the third approach, which is one we're going to have to keep most in mind because of the later Gemara here. Rabbi Yossi says, Beshiva Asar, Be'ashrim V'Sholosha U'B'Chodesh Kislev. He said the first rain is on 17th of Cheshvan. The second rain is on the 23rd, and the third day of rain is on Rosh Chodesh Kislev. V'chein hayah Rabbi Yossi Omer, Eina Yechidim Misanin Ad She'yagir Rosh Chodesh Kislev. So too, Rabbi Yossi used to taught that the individuals don't fast until Rosh Chodesh Kislev. What this means is that the Gemara in Tainus tells us that if the third rain comes and it hasn't rained, if time for the third rain arrives and it hasn't rained yet, then the Yechidim and everybody is able to make themselves like a Yachid, but it's the individuals who want to be especially pious, who are especially pious, the Torah scholars, they are the start the fastest individuals, but not as a community. The Gemara tells us there on top of the base that it's appropriate for everyone to consider themselves like a yachid, that everyone should feel like the responsibility of the community upon themselves. So the Rabbi Yossi says the Yachidim will only start to fast. They don't fast until Rosh Chodesh Kislev. And we said about this, Bishlama, we said Bishlama, Revi'ah Rishona. Why do we need to know when the three rains are? The first rain is Lishal, that if we need to know when to start saying the Tain Tal Matar in the hand of Israel, it's from the first rain. Now, that's why we need to know it. And Shlishis, why do we need to know about the third fast? It's Anos to the reason why we need to know about the third fast, the third rain is to fast, because the individuals begin to fast when it's the third rain. Why do we need to know when the second rain is? I'm Rabbi Zera and Nedarim. Rabbi Zera says if you make a vow and you vow that you're not going to, let's say, drink wine until the second rain, you need to know when the second rain is. We need to know when the second rain is. So, and we said, Aikumna is the following brayse ago. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, Yeshamim Sheyardu Shiva Yamim, Zachar Zeh, Atamone Bayan Revi'ah Rishona Ushniya. That the rains that come down directly one after another, there's no break in between. You could count the first and the second rain. If it goes for 7 days in a row, you could count it as rain number one and rain number two. It means that even though there's no break, if it goes for 7 days, it could still count for rain one and rain two. Come on, Rabbi Yossi. So this is like Rabbi Yossi. Could only be like Rabbi Yossi because Rabbi Meir has between the first rain and the second rain a gap of only 4 days, and Rabbi Yehuda has a gap of 10 days between the first rain and the second rain, whereas Rabbi Yossi has a gap of 7 days. So this brayse of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel must be consistent with the position of Rabbi Yossi. But as the Ran explains, that this is a question on Rabbi Zera, because Rabbi Zera said, because the assumption of our Gemara is that the person who makes this vow is vowing Ada Geshem. He's not saying Ada Geshem, because most people, we assume, just say Ada Geshem until the rain. And yet we're saying that it's only relevant because it's raining. It's actually raining. Not like Rabbi Zera said, if you say Ada Geshem, then even the Chachamim would admit it doesn't actually have to rain. It could just be the time of the rain. So the whole sheet of Rosh Shbag here is going according to the position of the Rabbanan. And he's saying if it actually rains, it could be counted as the second rain. But according to Rabbi Zera, the Rabbanan, if he uses the language of Ada Geshem, wouldn't require it to actually rain. It'd be enough to reach the time of the rain. So the Gemara says, no, the assumption was wrong. Here, the formulation he used was until the rains. He didn't say Ada Geshem, he said Ada Geshem. And that's why, according to the Rabbanan, they needed to actually rain. So now we're up to the next mission. If a person says, Konim Yayin She'eni Toem, he says, I'm not going to taste any wine. He takes a vow with Shana. He says, for the rest of the year. Misabra Shana, if there was a leap year, means to say they added an extra month of Adar, Asar Ba'u Bi'ibura. That means prohibited that year and also in its leap year, meaning to say he's prohibited till the end of the year, including the leap year. You add on the leap year as part of the vow. Let's say he says Ad Rosh Adar. Let's say he says he's taking a vow, he's not going to drink wine until Rosh Chodesh Adar. Means then we know that Adar can be 2 months. You could have a leap year, and when you add a leap year, you add a second Adar. So if you say I'm not going to drink wine until Rosh Chodesh Adar, which Adar do you have in mind? The first Adar or the second Adar? So we say Ad Rosh Adar Rishon. The assumption is until the beginning of the first Adar. But Ad Sof Adar. But if you say until the end of the Adar, it means Ad Sof Adar Rishon. If you say until the end of the Adar, it means the end of the Adar Rishon. So the Gemara says, Alma, we see from here, Stama the Adar the Ka'amar Rishon. We see from here that if a person just says Adar, if he doesn't specify Adar Rishon or Adar Sheni, the assumption is that it's referring to Adar Rishon. The assumption is it's referring to Adar Rishon, and that's the assumption. That if you just say Adar, it's referring to the first Adar, not the second Adar. So the Gemara says, well, let's just assume then that our Mishnah is like the position of Rabbi Yehuda, because the Tanya Adar Rishon, Kosev Adar Harishon. And if you're writing a contract and you want to say that this sale is happening, if it's Adar Rishon, you just have to write Adar Rishon, but you have to actually spell it out. But Adar Sheni, Kosev Adar Stam. Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir says that if you're writing a contract and there are two others that year, you write Adar Rishon, but if you just write Adar plain, that refers to Adar Sheni. Well, that's not like our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says if you just say Adar plain, it refers to Adar Rishon. So therefore, says the Gemara must be that our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yehuda, who says Adar Rishon Kosev Stam, Adar Sheni Kosev Tinyanan. He says no, that if you just write Adar, that refers to the first Adar, but for Adar Sheni, you have to write the second Adar. You have to write Adar Sheni. So that's not like, so Rabbi Yehuda is consistent with our Mishnah, that's for sure, because he says that the baseline Adar is Adar Rishon, but Rabbi Meir seems to be at odds with our Mishnah, because Rabbi Meir says the baseline Adar is Adar Sheni and not Adar Rishon. So Amar Baya Fil Tema Rabbi Meir, you could even say that our Mishnah is consistent with the position of Rabbi Meir, and so if that's the case, why does Rabbi Meir and why does our Mishnah say that the baseline Adar is Adar Rishon? Because Hadi Adar the Abri Shata Adar Lo Yada, that our Mishnah is talking about a case where you didn't know that there was a leap year, and so if you don't know that it's a leap year, and obviously if you refer to Adar, then you're only referring to Adar Rishon. But if you actually know it's a leap year, then Rabbi Meir says the baseline you're going to be referring to Adar Sheni. What's the assumption? Why would you say you're referring to Adar Sheni? It's the second Adar, but because that's the Adar, the Ran explains where you have Purim, where you have the holiday is in the second Adar. So that's why we would assume that if the person knows that there's two others that year, that he's referring to Adar Sheni. In fact, some authorities are the position, most authorities are the position that the whole concept of Mishen Nechnas Adar, that when Adar comes in, we increase the joy. Most say that refers only to Adar Sheni and not to Adar Rishon, the second Adar. Although some say Al Pi Sod, Al Pi Kabbalah, on the basis of mysticism, you can say both Adars. But the assumption is it refers to the second Adar. And the Gemara says, Vatanya, we'll bring a brisa to support this. Vatanya here, the Mefarish explains Siyua. It's the support. It's been elsewhere in the Rashi often refers to Tanya when it's to support. It's called binichusa. Here, the Mefarish uses the term siyua to support. Ad Rosh Chodesh Adar, Ad Rosh Chodesh Adar Rishon. And if a person just says, I'm thinking of Val until Rosh Chodesh Adar, refers to the first Adar. And I says Shnas Muberes, if it was a leap year, Ad Rosh Chodesh Adar Sheni, then refers to Adar Sheni. That seems to be consistent with the position of Rabbi Yehuda. But Bad explains the Gemara Mikal the Reisha Amud Beres Askinan, that the first clause was not referring to a year where you thought it was a leap year, then of course it's referring to Adar Rishon. What's even the question? No, so the Gemara explains, no, so the first case, we say it's referring to Adar Rishon because you didn't realize that there was another. If the first case is you didn't realize it was another Rishon, that there was another Sheni, the Yada. So since you didn't know that there was another Sheni, then we say the assumption is that you're referring to Adar Rishon. If you just say Adar, but if it was Pshitale, but if you knew that there was another Sheni, then we're going to say that the assumption is you're referring to Adar Sheni, and that's the position. That's the position of Rabbi Meir. This brisa therefore is referring to the position of Rabbi Meir. So the Gemara, therefore, now we go on to the last Mishnah of the 8th chapter of Nedarim. In this Mishnah, there's actually no Gemara on it, and the reason why there's no Gemara on it is because there was Gemara earlier. We discussed a lot of this Mishnah, a lot of these powerful concepts earlier in our tractate in Parak Shlishi, where we're talking about Nidre Ziruzin. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer says our Mishnah, if a person says Konim Yayim Cheni Toim, a person takes a vow that he's not going to drink any wine until it will be Pesach. Pesach. Now, since his language of his neder is ambiguous, we don't know for sure what he's saying. So we assume that really here, the assumption here is that he only intended to prohibit himself until the night of the Pesach, because the people really want to drink the 4 cups of wine, and therefore he's only going to be prohibited until the time where he could drink the arba kosos. Meaning to say that we don't assume that his assumption was to prohibit the arba kosos, the 4 cups of wine. That's a language where it's ambiguous. If he says explicitly that he wants to prohibit the 4 cups of wine, fine. But in the case where it's ambiguous, we're going to interpret it the way most people would say it. And most people aren't going to want to prohibit themselves from drinking the 4 cups of wine. He only intended to prohibit himself until the night of Pesach, the time where people drink the 4 cups of wine. Let's say he says, let's say he's standing there before Yom Kippur and he says, I'm not going to eat meat until the time of the fast. The assumption was because it's a big inyan to eat Sudas and Mafsekes on the eve of Yom Kippur, to eat a big meal on the eve of Yom Kippur. Part of the prep, either it's because it's part of the preparation for the holiday, or because we're going to say the eve of Yom Kippur is itself a yontif. The Gemara has a discussion about this in Maseches Yoma. So we're going to say if a person makes the vow, he says, I'm not going to eat until the fast. Really, he said, is he really intended to be able to eat the Sudas of seconds. He was prohibiting himself only up until the meal on the eve of Yom Kippur, but not the actual meal. Rabbi Yossi ben Noam, and Rabbi Yossi, his son says, the son of Rabbi Yossi says, Konim Shum Shani Toim. If he says, I'm not going to eat any garlic, Achetei Shabbos, until Shabbos, Einu Aser Ela Adleli Shabbos. Then we're going to say his assumption is that he only intends to prohibit the garlic until the night of Shabbos, because Ezra made a takana. And we see from here that even though it was actually a mitzvah, it's just a takana from Ezra, but Ezra made a takana that a person, in the Gemara in Baba Kama tells us this, that Ezra made a takana that a person should eat garlic. Ezra made a takana that since there's the mitzvah of ona, of husband and wife being together on the night of Shabbos, and then Ezra made a takana that person should have garlic on that night, because garlic increases, is a aphrodisiac. And so therefore a person should eat the garlic on Friday night. So we assume that even though it's not an actual mitzvah, it's just a takana, that the assumption was they took this vow upon himself. That it was only up until the time where he's supposed to be eating the garlic. A person says to his friend, I take a vow that I'm not going to have any benefit from you if you're not going to come and take for your son 1 bushel of wheat or 2 barrels of wine. Then he's allowed to annul this vow even without a chacham, because the assumption is, because he could say, because he could say, the only reason why he said it was for my honor, this was indeed my honor. Meaning to say, if a person makes such a vow that he says to this friend that I'm not going to get any benefit from you if you're not going to come and take for your son a bushel of wheat, then he says that was all done for my honor. My honor was if you're taking stuff, if I'm getting benefit from you, I want you to get benefit from me. But he says that the whole thing was done only for my honor, and so now it's my honor is that you don't take it. He says, Zel Kvodi, this is indeed my honor, that I can annul this vow, that you don't actually have to take anything, that I actually didn't want to take it from you. And so therefore he's able to annul it even without chacham. So too, somebody says to his friend, Konim Shat Nenetli, I take a vow that you're going to that you won't have any benefit from me. If you don't come and give to my son a core of wheat, and 2 barrels of wine, Rabbi Meir Omer Asar Achiyit. And Rabbi Meir says he actually has to give the vow. He can annul the vow himself. Even without a chacham, the Yomer, whoa, he could say it's as though I received it in the first place, meaning to say I have the right to waive it, because we're talking about a case where the child is omed al shulchan shalav, he's standing by the table of his father, so he has the right to annul the vow in the first place. And so therefore he could waive his rights to receiving this, and therefore he can annul the vow even without the permission. Let's say so let's say he's trying to convince him, people are trying to convince him to marry the daughter of his sister, i.e. his niece. People are trying to marry him. The people are trying to convince him to do shidduchin with his niece. Why is that? The Ran says because this was a mitzvah. It's mishum the mitzvah, like we say in Yevamos, anoses pasacho. So alavakas of Omer, az tikra v'Hashem yaneh. That if somebody marries his niece, about him, the verse states, then you shall call and God will answer. So even though Rabbi Yehuda Chassid says you're not supposed to marry your niece in the tzavav, Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, here the Gemara says explicitly, the Gemara Yevama says explicitly, it's a mitzvah to marry your niece. So if somebody's trying to convince him to marry his niece, and he says, Konem he nanesli lo, he takes a vow, she can never have any benefit from me because he doesn't want to marry her. Sister, somebody wants to divorce his wife, and he says, Konem ishti nanesli lo olam, he says, my wife is not allowed to have any benefit from me forever, meaning to say he's trying to divorce her. We're going to say that they're not prohibited to have benefit from him. Yeah, because it's the only reason why he's doing this. The only reason why he's divorcing, why he's saying this benefit is because he doesn't want to be married to them, but he's not really making a vow that they can't have any benefit. Let's say he's trying to convince his friend to eat with him. He says, I'm not going to enter into your house at all. He says, I take a vow that I'm not going into your house. Or he says, I'm not going to even have a drop of a drink from you. He's actually still going to be allowed to go into his house and to have a drink from him. Because we say that really wasn't intending not to go into his house at all. And really the intent was not that he wasn't going to have anything to drink. The whole intent was that he didn't want to sit down and have a meal with him. But it was what's called Nidre Ziruzin. He was trying to encourage him with his vows. He was trying to be very encouraging. But the whole intent was not to say, I'm not going to go into your house at all and I'm not going to have its own name.